Everyone's ready. And there we go. I think we are recording. Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome Internet.
Hi, Internet.
We've made it to October. This is not our spooky movie episode that's coming up, and it's going to be our first guest that we're hoping to get on board, and he's agreed. But for this week I think we're kind of at a bi-weekly pace.
Ish.
Yeah,
When we feel like it,
get
around to it.
Yeah. We are turning back to fantasy. And so let's cue up our
bring it on.
Our music here, although gosh, let's see if this works. It's being a little bit weird.
Oh, here we go. Oh. Yes.
And as always, we kind of got to talk over it a little bit. So
yeah, and we'll trip up the sensors yet. Oh, I feel like Horace Grant just running out onto the United Center here.
I never really sat down and listened to the Alan Parsons Project.
Me neither.
So this is.
I heard this because I watched a lot of Chicago Pulse.
Moody and atmospheric, which is apropos to the movie that we watched.
The perfect film for medieval kind of gritty fantasy, I would say.
But with very controversial anachronism, like up there with what was the Heath Ledger Night movie?
Oh, Knight's Tale.
Yes.
Underrated. I will go to bat for that movie. That is an enjoyable film.
I will as well.
That's one of those, like, if, I don't, flip through cable channels anymore, but that was one that seemed to be like on TV at any given moment on some cable channel. It was like that and Goodfellas. And those are both movies. If they were halfway through, if it was 10 minutes until the end, I'm going to stay and finish watching this because this is just a good time.
Totally. And some great talent introduced in that. It was like Paul Bettany, who
Alan
plays,
Tudyk.
Alan Tudyk, Resident Alien guy.
Yeah.
But this week, we are talking about, God, what year was Ladyhawke?
85.
1985.
That's right. We are in Hawktober.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. I was workshopping that one around the house.
Nice. Yes. A classic movie of are they star-crossed lovers? They're moon-crossed lovers. They're lycanthropically cursed lovers. And a powerhouse of sort of four pretty badass actors coming together underneath Richard Donner, trying to do an art house fantasy movie. And we have, of course, Rutger Hauer.
Oh, the man.
We have the amazing Michelle Pfeiffer. We have Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick, right in his imperial phase too. I mean, he was. War Games was like a year or two before that, and it was like a year before Ferris Bueller. That's like right.
So Ladyhawke was before Ferris Bueller because he's totally pulling Ferris Bueller. I think I saw Ladyhawke after Ferris Bueller, and I was like, wait a minute, he's just playing like medieval Ferris Bueller. What's going on with this? But like, he sells it in all his like nasally charm. And then rounding out the last is Leo McKern.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, a little bit of an NPR PBS household, right?
Okay.
Where my parents were watching like a lot of BBC shows, and Leo McKern was on a legal, like a British legal drama called...
He was a Rumpole of the Bailey, wasn't he?
Rumpole of the Bailey, thank you. Which, to my preteen mind, I was just like, I don't know what the hell this guy is, but he sure is harumping up the screen a lot.
I've never seen him in anything before, but then I looked him up while I was watching the movie, and I saw Rumpole of the Bailey. I've heard of that. I never know that. Yeah, sure, okay.
But yeah, the Ladyhawke was a weird one when it came out. I watched it with my parents, probably in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking it was kind of badass, but it was also a little forgettable. Like, it didn't have like strong story beats that I was just like, remember that totally badass moment. Yeah. It was all moody landscapes and lots of like animal cinema, like there's just like long shots of like the hawk swooping across the lake and then like Catholic symbolism with like mm-hmm. choirs kind of like doing their thing, and so it had like a real gravitas to it, I would mm-hmm. say, while also being sort of balls out weird in a certain way with the Alan Parsons soundtrack and these bright, vibrant costumes, these chainmail hoodies and weird techno crossbows, like
and weird like futuristic football helmets on the knights.
Yeah, what is with those?
I was trying to think. Is that was that maybe a real thing? I mean, I've just never seen that before, but it sure didn't look like anything I've ever seen at a Ren fair. I don't know what the hell. Anyway, we're way ahead of ourselves, but yeah, weird helmets. It's just that kind of movie. But yeah.
So I can honestly say, like, the movie didn't quite click with me.
Yeah.
Like, I was like I watched it and it was like the kind of fantasy movie that if your parents are like NPR PBS heads are like, oh, this is art housey and kind of like has artistic validity, and I'm just like, I kind of want like more blood and guts and boobs, and I'm not getting it from this. And but coming back now, I still enjoyed it. Like it definitely. I feel like it was grasping for a kind of fantasy that had never been approached before, and I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think it kind of like reached it successfully. Even without what I would say not meeting a threshold of badassitude that I think I was looking for back then, and I'll be honest, I think I'm still looking for.
We're all chasing that dragon.
We are. So what was your kind of like initial experience with Ladyhawke, and then how did it feel to kind of revisit it?
Well, first of all, this was my first viewing of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is kind of a strange one for me because I don't think, okay, it came out in 1985. I was 8, mm-hmm. which I think, watching this movie now, right in my 8-year-old wheelhouse. Like, I was, when I was 8, I wasn't into Dungeons and Dragons yet, but I had like the Dungeons and Dragons coloring book that my mom's friend gave me. I had I loved the cartoon, like that was on, and yeah, I was D&D curious. And for some reason, at the time, I didn't even know this movie existed. I don't think I heard about this movie, heard the name of this movie until maybe high school. And then it was just well, that just sounds like a cheesy 80s movie. Yeah, I don't think I'll watch that. But then by and by, I would hear people, my age or a little older, and they would kind of wax rhapsodic about it. It was this fun sword and sorcery movie that was a little elevated above your, Beastmasters or whatever, the sword and sandals movies of the age. And it by and by ended up on my list of movies that clearly had some impact on people, and it just whizzed right by me. And and watching it now, I'm like, how was this kept from me? Like, like it was almost like there was a vast international conspiracy to make sure I didn't know anything about this movie and didn't see it. Like, it wasn't on TV. It wasn't, I wasn't playing at the movie theater where I could see it. There was just, it had zero like impact on me before that, no cultural, knowledge of it whatsoever. And watching it now, it's like, yeah, if I'd seen this when I was 8, this would have been my favorite movie of all time. Like, well,
okay,
it would have been like Star Wars and then this.
Cool.
It's just like everything I kind of enjoyed when I was 8 to 10 years old, and watching now, it's like, oh, this is a perfectly fun movie. Like, how is everybody not seeing this? Like, it's, I mean, I wouldn't put it up there with Princess Bride, but I'd put it in the same ballpark, and that's one everybody still loves. I mean, kids are still watching Princess Bride.
Yeah.
I'd show them this too. The whole time I was thinking, are there titties in this movie? And that's why I didn't know about it. Like, if so, Michelle Pfeiffer, I would like to see that. And there are no titties. So parents, you don't have to have that conversation with your kids. It's safe to watch Ladyhawke.
I mean, this was probably my first exposure to Michelle Pfeiffer, and both she and Rutger Hauer are like, they have this otherworldly gorgeousness about them.
Yeah,
they are just incredibly beautiful people, and like, yeah, it's not a terribly sexy movie. It's very much like a romantic movie. Not that is necessarily mutually exclusive. But like, yeah, it's very much about kind of the yearning of the heart over like physical desire. And in fact, I think physical desire as presented by the villain, the bishop, it's a little bit crass. But yeah, I would say like, young Michelle Pfeiffer, dreamfully walking around in sort of like makeshift robes and stuff every night. Like, I think that awakened a little bit of like something in me as a kid, where I'm just like, oh, hot damn, that woman is very pretty. And then like, Batman Returns comes out and she's in like Catwoman leather. She is a very attractive woman, yes. And Rutger Hauer, I actually think had I seen Blade Runner before this? I don't know, but I have memories of seeing The Hitcher, where Rutger Hauer is like a psycho. He brings a real intense badassness to the screen.
Yeah.
And he's the only character like all dressed in black, and he's got a big ass shoulder pad, and he's always like carrying this hawk on him. Like, the aesthetic of this movie is so like Trapper Keeper. Like, it's just like it's a little glitter art like style. Like, I want to get into the aesthetic actually in a pretty big way, because like I really don't think anyone else has quite captured what this movie is trying to capture.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely gorgeous people. And
I liked the kind of trope inversion of it, though, where you have Rutger Hauer looking like Darth Vader,
much,
and the bad guys being this bishop all in white and gold, and his his band of guardsmen or whatever, all dressed in white and red, and hearing Rutger Hauer just looking like death himself with his enormous sword and his cool ass hawk. My wife was very impressed, by the way. I called it. I was like, "Is that a red-tailed hawk?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I don't think they had red-tailed hawks in Europe." I looked it up. Yeah, they're North and South American. They have them there now because been imported there for, falconers and whatnot. But yeah, that's a big error on their part.
Yeah.
I'm a budding bird nerd. Like, my wife has trained me well.
So we might as well get into the aesthetic, because I think that's probably the juiciest thing to talk about for this movie. And I think perhaps the reason that this kind of slipped your radar a bit, is that it is, even back in the 80s, there was this understanding and this vision of fantasy, being California bodybuilders and, huge swords and blood and guts. And this movie, I think to some extent, actually presents itself as a period piece with mythology layered on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that they even attempted to sell it as referencing medieval myth, when in fact it actually didn't, apparently. But this idea of like lovers that assume animal form, and we maybe could talk a little synopsis here, actually, so to help the discussion. Maybe I didn't need to skip that. But like, it is a very weirdly grounded piece visually in sort of period piece. And maybe again, this is kind of like growing up in the NPR household, where this felt like I'm seeing like monks and tonsures, and I'm thinking like Father Cadfael, right? Like,
yeah.
so there's none of this sense of like, there's no goblins or orcs or like running through. Well, actually, there's some beautiful landscape photography in it.
Yeah.
But like, I was not a total D&D nerd, but I was into fantasy. I was reading the Dragonlance novels. I was like playing, I understood the D&D world, and I thought about like fantasy a lot. And this, and yeah, Ladyhawke does not feel like how I understood fantasy at the time.
Yeah, I can see that.
But when I think about it, there was this whole other world of fantasy that I was not clued into back in the 80s. And I think it was kind of like mostly literature and fiction based fantasy for women to some extent, that lived kind of halfway in romance novel kind of style, but was mixed. It was like mixed romance novel and mixed kind of feminist literature. And I like everyone was reading Mists of Avalon, and I growing up in Portland, Oregon, like I was aware of a certain like kind of like lesbian in a wolf t-shirt, like talking at a book club. And I think she was accessing a kind of fantasy that I didn't understand, that maybe I didn't, that maybe it was probably too romantic for my tastes, frankly. And watching this movie, like, I could sort of now see maybe it kind of pointing towards a romantic fantasy of the 80s that I was only sort of dimly aware of, that was not really being satisfied very much. I think it was mostly satisfied by books. And I'm surprised this kind of didn't take off, because I think it really captures that moody aesthetic.
And a very, like a courtly romantic. Like, not like bodice ripping, like none of that.
It's historical.
It's very chaste.
It's historical. It's very like love of the heart. And it's very like tragic. It's very the tragedy of these lovers who could not come together.
Right.
So, and so that's a fantasy that I think gives a little bit more of an erudite or academic nerd of the 80s permission to like really enjoy.
Yeah.
And I almost felt a kind of sadness watching this, that there wasn't more of this, that there's an aesthetic there for nerds way back before nerdy stuff became popular. There was like middle-aged nerds in the 80s were just a whole group of folks looking for entertainment and were kind of like not getting much. And
stuck with, the shittier sword and sorcery
yeah,
kind of movies. The Sword and the Sorcerer, your Beastmaster, Beyond the Portal of Time, your
and so I don't know, my understanding as a
dwellers.
nerd in the 80s was D&D. Like there was definitely stuff being thrown at me to like satisfy me, and it was Dragonlance novels and fantasy novels and cartoons and and there was this sense of actually kind of, I would almost say like mentorship, like when the internet was taken off, you're sort of like finding like Usenet groups and stuff of like fantasy nerds that were in this more historical, picaresque, and yeah, so I was just thinking like wolves and hawks with glitter paint on binders while listening to like moody atmospheric synth sounds, and that's just a thing that there should be more of in the world, and there probably isn't. And Ladyhawke really nicely captures, and yeah, I guess like it didn't, I don't know, it didn't quite land despite being one of the few things that I think satisfy a little bit of that nerd generation. Is that what I'm trying to say? I don't know.
It's funny, like, as bad as I felt for myself for not seeing it, my wife had also not seen it. And the whole time I'm thinking, as much as I would have enjoyed this when I was 8, oh my God, 8-year-old horse girl, my wife, seeing this, if she'd seen this, her head would have exploded. Like, everything she was into was in this movie, like.
Yeah, that's that.
Horses and birds she's obsessed with. What do you got? And wolves.
There you go.
It was like they made a movie just for her.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she is of that like aesthetic.
Yeah,
and that's actually gives me a little bit of hope, because it means it's still kind of alive and well, and it's a slice of fantasy that I clearly have overlooked or dismissed in my life, as as being overly romantic. Probably I would probably consider it like a little bit too woke, even though like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I think of some of the D&D settings that have kind of been released in the romantic fantasy sphere of like 80s fantasy novels, and they get immediately attacked for, quite frankly, probably the feminist presence of it. And I is this romantic fantasy a feminist movie? I mean, obviously we're probably not the guys to be able to argue yay or nay for it, like, but it does. It's, on one hand, Michelle Pfeiffer is still very much a little bit damsel-y in this, but on the other hand, it is presenting a perspective of yearning love and true love winning that, like, I think is very attractive to women.
Yeah.
And with slow shots of beautiful animals, and and an overarching story of tragedy and male obsession and male possession, very much being kind of the villain of this movie.
Yeah,
that's radical right there. So again, and I'm not the guy to do this, but like I would maybe argue that there is kind of a little bit of a feminist like kind of theme to that, where the villain is just basically a possessive, sexually
repressed.
Sexually repressed, but deeply jealous male presence.
Essentially,
like the source of the curse. And for those of you that are just kind of like listening to us talk about it, maybe have not seen this movie, we talked about these kind of four figures, but essentially we have Michelle Pfeiffer and Rutger Hauer are lovers. He is cursed to turn into a wolf every night. She is cursed to be a hawk during the day, and so they can only sort of like briefly touch at twilight or dawn before they assume their animal form. So, and most of the movie is basically from the perspective of a medieval thief played by Matthew Broderick, kind of like learning about this couple and being won over by them to essentially help them try to lift the curse. And the way they lift the curse is that they go back to this bishop has cursed them because he was in love with a girl and couldn't get her, and she secretly fell in love with the captain of the guard.
He was the captain of his guard, and
and so they kind of go back, and they kind of like the whole third act is this reckoning of confronting this bishop who has cursed them, and the twist, of course, is that there's an eclipse, and it's this like one moment where like night and day exists at the same time, and they can both, to break the curse, all they have to do is have the bishop stare upon them as people once more.
Right.
And they were like, well, that'll never happen. And so the wise monk, Leo McKern, is the one that kind of figures it out with a vision from God. And there's not, it's not, this is frankly, this is not sword and sorcery. There's no sorcery.
No,
there's the mythical magic of love. So that's why it's romantic fantasy, where the only things that can kind of bend or break the laws of reality are passions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, jealousy creates this curse while love breaks it. Proud love.
Right.
And it is it's a very moving and well done story, and is presented mythologically.
Yeah.
Frankly, if you got Roman monks involved, I think that's where like my 10-year-old brain at the time was just like, this isn't fantasy. Like, because you got like the boring priests who, I mean, I don't know. Again, PBS, NBR household, there's not, we're definitely not Catholic, and there was nothing, and there was a certain amount of not contempt, but kind of like confusion and alienness to historical Catholicism as this monolithic structure in society. So I don't know. I rambled and ranted a little bit there. But at least I gave a little bit of synopsis so that we can kind of like reference what we're talking about. What did you think of Matthew Broderick in this film?
I liked him a lot. I think I read some of the reactions to it,
him breaking the fourth wall all the time.
Yeah, and that people had trouble with, well, he sounds like he's from Queens. his Everybody else sounds like, vaguely European. He's not really even trying. I have no problem. If you can't do it, don't even try. It's my if you can't do it well, don't try as far as accents. Yeah. And I liked the, he does a lot of asides, not quite fourth wall breaking, but they, like you would do like they did in Ferris Bueller, but they do the, he's very religious.
Yeah. He's talks to God religious. Yeah.
Yeah. He has a running dialogue with God, and those are kind of the that's the commentary going through.
It's a great way to get the inner monologue out. And it's a great way to Greek chorus throughout it, because it is really his perspective as he's discovering these lovers, and he's like basically turning to the camera and being, what the fuck is with these guys? Like, but it totally won me over. Like, I can totally understand how people that saw Ferris Bueller first, and where he
he's doing the Ferris Bueller thing.
Yeah,
right.
And then maybe seeing the second, even if it did come out first, and like kind of having that vision of Matthew Broderick tainted as like, oh my God, he's a medieval Ferris Bueller. What I got to give Matthew props for that I really noticed this time around is that it is kind of an incredible physical performance, and
Yeah.
in many ways, like the fight scenes in this movie were kind of crap. If I'm gonna like, we can talk about that later. But
Yeah.
but Matthew Broderick is kind of amazing. So he plays this thief who escapes from the bishop's castle, and he's the only one that can maybe get back in.
Right.
Although they have no problem getting back in, don't really need him. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But he's you know, he's crawling through pipes. He's like, the opening shot is like a total like Shawshank
crawling out of the privy, right? The sewage pipe.
He's pulling himself out of the mud, and then later, like he's challenged by the guards, and he's like ducking under tables and jumping up onto trellises, and then they like attack him in the monk's tower later, and there's like a trapdoor action. He like leaps from the wall onto the trapdoor, and then he's like sitting on this like tiny like 2x4, you know, over space, and I was just like, holy shit, Matthew Broderick is pulling like the full parkour performance here. Like none of us think of Matthew Broderick, the action star, and he's not. I mean, that's the kind of the amazing thing about this physical performance is that he is both doing an incredible amount of work and stunt and acrobaticism while completely playing as weak, puny, cowardly, pathetic. You know, the mouse is his name as the thief.
Yeah, he's very much a character who's clearly never, you know, even attempted a fair fight in his life.
Oh yeah,
he's just figured out how to get out of fights. You know, just either talk. If he can't talk his way out, then he's going to dodge and slip his way out. You know,
which he does. He kind of steals all the physical performance of this movie. I think are all him.
Yeah.
Ducking and diving and weaving and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, you know, and presenting himself as pathetic and puny. Yeah. While like I think he's really fucking working up a sweat, you know, like and it's and part of that is this, you know, amazing contrast with Rutger Hauer, black and posing on the black horse with the hawk and the humongous sword. We'll talk about the sword. And it's just like it's amazing that you watch this movie and you're like, whoa, check out that badass. Well, meanwhile, Matthew Broderick has been like, you know, earning a couple gold medals.
Yeah.
And so just those are really interesting presences where he's incredibly physical, doing all the work, and totally like looking pathetic against this incredible badass on a horse who frankly sits on the horse the whole movie. And he gets in a couple fights and they're okay.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, like how, you know, those kind of movies in the 80s, you know, are from sword and sorcery to slightly, you know, less unserious. Mm-hmm. They always had a comic relief sidekick of some sort. You know, Conan had a comic relief guy. So it's, you know, you have the comic relief character, except he's your POV character throughout it, which is, I always enjoy seeing something like that. Like, whatchamacallit, A Big Trouble in Little China, pretty much the same way. I mean, Kurt Russell would not, if this were a real martial arts movie, he would be the comic relief sidekick, except that he's the POV character in this and kind of inverts the trope. So you get to see all of these tropes through the eyes of a character who is above those things, who is, you know, has kind of, what am I trying to say? Is like a third person omniscient view of it, you know?
Yeah.
Who can point out, oh yeah, this is kind of silly, but they're still a part of it. You know, at no point is he turning to the camera and going like, you believe this shit? He's like, he's as invested in it as everybody else. But, you know, at the same time, his character is sort of an inversion of tropes. You know, he's not, you know, the dashing lead in any way. You know, he says to Rutger Hauer at one point, like, I have no honor, I never will. So, like, if you need that from me, you're going to be disappointed. It is something like that, you know, like, and then proceeds, of course, to be an honorable man at the end. But
yeah, I mean, that's an arc that we're all familiar with. But,
yeah,
you know, but I think you make a really good point about the perspective of it through that personality. And I think, again, the reason why, like the fantasy that I was used to was over the shoulder, follow the bodyguard, like murder, kind of murder porn, right? Like, and instead here we are presented with this frail, snarky thief seeing this story of romantic love. We're not following the badass at all. Now, what was your reaction when Alfred Molina showed up?
Yeah. Okay. I literally I said like, hey, who's this like
Mysterious
Timu who's this Timu Alfred Molina they got for this? And then I go on IMDb, I'm like, oh no, that is the Amazon Alfred Molina. That is in fact Alfred Molina.
Oh man,
yeah, he's doing a lot. I'm into it.
It was a total holy shit for me when he showed up. I'm just like, what? Dr. Octopus is here as the Wolf Hunter? Like, this is and sadly it's a pretty short role, but he has a great death scene.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
one of the best deaths in the
basically
movie.
Michelle Pfeiffer shoves him into a wolf trap, but like it's like the camera's fixed
on his head.
Like, she's by a tree, he's like looking for her, she shoves him into the wall trap, and then like without any zoom in or cut, like you just get him like writhing on the ground in the wolf trap going and he's
iron jaws over his head. Just spasm. That's gnarly. I had a feeling it was like that was a smaller part, but they got Alfred Molina and were like, oh, this is too good. This guy is too good for the part. Let's write some more pages. We're just to have him, say something cool every, before he dies or something. But yeah. I also appreciated John Wood as the bishop, who was Professor Falcon in War Games. War Games reunion.
Oh wow!
It was really
I didn't
crazy.
pick up on that.
That was IMDb to the rescue. I am not that good, but I was like, "Who is that guy? It looks so familiar." It was John Wood, yeah, Professor Falcon.
Man, what a different role. Boy, that's a character actor then. Like,
yeah,
I would never have drawn that connection, and yet, like, I can immediately see them next to each other in my mind's eye. I mean, he is as a villain, he is barely in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's something to kind of note, is that his presence in the plot is almost entirely off screen, and his job when John Wood shows up is basically either be contemptuous and imperious as he's telling people to kill these people, or in shocked confusion and horror like that for the final scene.
Yeah, they make a point, like the whole reason he needs, Rutger Hauer needs Gaston is that the bishop never leaves the palace.
Yeah.
You can only get to him by sneaking in there, through whatever way Gaston escaped. So yeah, and he's and Rutger Hauer is very like, I would kill this guy, if he were in front of me right now, I would kill him. If he were a mile away, I would walk over there and go kill him. Like, he's strictly like point A to point B. I have to go murder him as soon as possible, and he can't be bothered with waiting a day for this eclipse.
Right.
He doesn't believe is going to happen anyway. That was one part I felt like it was kind of falling apart at the end, as everybody keeps telling him, just wait like a few hours, man. You've waited all this time. Like, nope, we're doing this right now. It was like they kept kind of contriving reasons to delay it a little bit. So it's like, the eclipse happens at the exact right moment, which, I don't know, that felt very, it felt very scripty, if you know what I mean. Like, well, we have to wrap this up. How do we do it? We kind of painted ourselves into a corner here.
Yeah, he just has this moment where someone breaks the window, and he sees the eclipse, and he realizes, oh my gosh, like it's true. But this, they did it that way because they had to do it after he hears the bells tolls, which means that the monk killed the hawk, and that was the huge fall apart for me, where Rutger Hauer tells the monk, kill the hawk if you hear the bells toll, which is just like, wait, what? and basically his thing was, he was assuming if the bells toll, I probably got killed. Although, why did he associate those two? And if I got killed, then the bishop will maybe find Anjou and dominate her or something. I don't know, but it was definitely a thing where like a lover is telling someone to kill his love because purity, reason, sanctity. And so at that point I was just like, whoa, like, okay, you're kind of a toxic asshole, and like you're telling this person who's bent over backwards, this poor monk, to kill like this woman that he's in love with. Like, it's just like, dude, no. Like, and
I kept thinking, it's like, well, she's a human for 12 hours of the day. You could ask her.
Yeah, exactly. Although the fact that they
messages back
never,
and forth. Well, they're passing messages back and forth through Matthew Broderick, and they do kind of a nice little like Cyrano de Bergerac thing where he's kind of gussying up there.
Oh, totally. Totally gussying up there.
Tell her I love her. And he like proceeds to like give this, some florid thing, her magnificent beauty, and like, I
mean, he just wanted to see Michelle Pfeiffer blush, and I don't blame him. That's but yeah, the thing when the captain was like, no, kill the bird if the bells ring, that felt so contrived and so asshole-ish.
And then the bells only ring because he like takes out a dude on a balcony who gets wrapped up in like the cord and then falls and it pulls the cord. Like, oh, come on.
and so yeah, the bells toll.
Yeah.
He thinks the monk has killed his love, which, first of all, again, a shitty thing to ask someone to do. And also, if he like paid like an ode of emotional intelligence, he could tell that the monk wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
But he believes the monk did it. He goes through all this anguish. He's like, all right, well, that's just it. I've just got to kill the bishop just for revenge at this point, because I'm going to be a wolf forever, and I'll never be with my love. And then he sees the eclipse, and he's like, oh, the wonder of the eclipse. And then she steps in because, the monk's not going to kill her.
Yeah.
And like he sees her, and they have the moment, and they see the bishop, and then it's just like, goddamn, Richard Donner can stretch a shot, while keeping a movie tight. That's a rare talent. But anyway, long shot. They all see each other. It breaks. He breaks to his knees. Or the bishop kind of drops to his knees, and then they embrace. Did the bishop die somehow? Man, he's such a forgettable villain that I don't even remember.
He got the sword thrown through him. The shot they kept doing with Rutger Hauer is very good at throwing the 6-foot-long broadsword with just like it's a lawn dart.
Man, that one of those shots, I was like, holy shit! How did they do that shot? And it's this one right here. How did Matthew Broderick agree to have this sword stab into this tree right next to him? And then I'm wondering, like, how could you do that safely? Could you cut through the tree and pull it really quick with a twine? Or even then, like, Matthew Broderick, like, that's a brave shot to be in.
Yeah, I couldn't see where they cheated the shot. So yeah, that's stay real still, Matthew.
Oh God, the sword. I don't know what to say about the sword. Richard Donner. Okay, Excalibur was after this, but I feel like Richard Donner was looking for some of that Excalibur juice, like trying to fixate on this jeweled sword that and the jewels kind of just look like
really
they look like just plastic, obvious plastic.
It looks so janky.
It's somehow like the jewel represents the honor he's looking for his family. They make a really big deal about it for it to be so forgettable.
Yeah, and then like, oh, we lost your sword in the river when we were crossing it. And it's like, no, Matthew Broderick was hiding it down his shirt. Again, the sword is bigger than Matthew.
Yeah, it really is. He has it in his cloak so many times.
Is that the shirt of holding? Yeah, it was a janky looking sword.
Yeah, why did he
this is
say
where
that
they
he lost? Why did he say that he lost the sword?
I don't know.
Like, was he just
to keep
fucking with him, or?
Yeah, I think it was like, well, if he doesn't have his sword, then he can't go off and murder the bishop right this minute.
Yeah,
it's
that
like,
must be it.
Dude, he'll find a way. Come on. Although the whole thing, it was like he wanted, that was his, like, the last socket in the sword was for the quest that he had to fulfill, which was to murder this bishop. So I guess you could say, like, well, if he doesn't do it with the sword, does it count? And I would think, yeah, murdered bishop's murdered bishop. He's not going to care which sword you killed him with. But it was not. For all the things to cheap out on in the prop department, how do you cheap out on that sword? It was so important.
I mean, God, Richard Donner loves his refraction lenses, so I think he was, getting light rays kind of streaming from any time there's a light on the screen. And I think he was hoping that could cover up those jewels a bit, like these languid, It
probably looked better on a VCR in 1988 than it does in 4K on my 65-inch TV. Humble brag. Some things, that's one of those things that 80s stuff, 70s, 80s, you start to see some of those, especially practical effects, and they look, the jankiness gets cranked way up when you have these really high definition. So it can really, it really strikes into focus when you do see it done really well.
Yeah.
Especially in recent movies, when you see practical effects done well, it's like, you watch Fury Road or something like that. And I mean, there are a couple of CGI shots that don't quite hold up, but the practical effects still look amazing in that.
Yeah, Fury Road had it's all stunt work anyway, but I fucking love being able to see all the effects nakedly. There is this weird thing where all of cinema before probably about 2006 gave themselves so much elbow room for stuff to be good enough.
Yeah.
And then everything after 2006, the age of high def, they're just like, you know what, if we're gonna pay CG artists, for every single pixel on the screen, we're gonna ride them super hard and make sure they're, I don't know. It became a game to pick apart effects, and then
that was something I really I laughed at watching this. Was like, okay, well, I kind of knew going in. Okay, well, he turns into a wolf, she turns into a hawk. What kind of 80s special effects will they use to visualize this? Do we get Rick Baker to do some kind of crazy creature effect as he's turning into a wolf? No, Rutger Hauer's just going to be running down a road, and then he's a wolf.
You can see the cut. But there's a great shot of him sleeping. Or not sleeping, but his eyes open and he's on the ground. I think he's wounded after the crossbow bolt. And then it just does a crossfade to a wolf. And it's all it needs. It looks really good. And also you're sitting there going okay, did they get the wolf to lie exactly where Rutger Hauer is? Or do they film the wolf first and they're all Rutger Hauer lay there in the way the wolf was? I was trying to figure out how just the animal handling on this movie is kind of crazy. But the crossfade was kind of silly. I chuckled, and at the same time, I was just like, yeah, that's all I need. Like, this is
It's if you can't do if you can't do a Rick Baker makeup job,
it's not that kind of movie.
It's not that kind of movie. Yeah, if they made it now, they would do something like that. It would be full on underworld, lichen transformation thing going on. You don't need that.
It's like the magic of romantic fantasy kind of is just crossfades. Like I was like Rick Baker is swords and sorcery magic where you want to see the blood and guts.
Mm-hmm.
And like in romantic fantasy, it's just like, no, we don't want to see the blood and guts. We want and magic is something. Magic is love and passion and feeling, and which transcends the fantasy into the real world, where it's like, oh, that there is a kind of magic to love that these stories speak to. And so it's interesting to talk about the film effects, because it's like film magic is like it's aching for realism, because now everybody's like trying to catch the fake,
right?
And
it's refreshing to see a movie every now and then where it's like, well, yeah, we don't need it. We're not going to try. Like I said, if you can't do it well, don't bother at all.
He was aiming for something different. Like his shots are beautiful. Like that crossfade lasts for 20 seconds with the synth doing its thing, and he's just like, this is a goddamn good crossfade. Like this is like, I'm gonna put some effort into it, and it's right for the movie. That it is, language shots of like Hawk swooping over the ocean in slow motion, the horse riding across the thing. Like it's almost like the thin blue line style, like Terrence Malick.
I can see that. Lots of long produced shots of the hawk in flight or a wolf running. It's like we Richard Donner, he knows how to shoot an animal movie. If called upon, he can do that for you.
And
he can make a sick ass Homeward Bound.
He was scouting the landscapes for making the movie, listening to Alan Parsons on his fucking Walkman.
We gotta talk about Alan Parsons.
And he is like, he's vibing so much as he's like trying to frame like the countryside hills to this like synth soundtrack that he's just like, God damn it, this is the music for my movie, and I'm not gonna let you talk me into anything medieval. And so, like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about
a choice. I mean,
it was the right choice. If you're gonna Terrence Malick a shot for like 20 seconds, you're gonna want to put some dreamy synth. It works. It's the right choice, and yet totally weird.
It doesn't not work, but I'm not sure I would go as far to say that it works.
It works for me.
It doesn't ruin it. I'm not sure it adds to it, though.
I don't know. I couldn't think of anything else. In fact, I feel like if I'd been given like a James Horner, symphonic, heroic thing, I think it would be so much more forgettable.
The Conan music would not have worked. I mean, it's the most awesome soundtrack ever, but no, it's the wrong music for this. But
no, a drum cannot touch Ladyhawke, man. But you just gotta have one guy leaning on the keyboard.
In 1984, you could not have made this movie and put that music in it. In 1986, you could not have put this music in it. It would only have happened in 1985. Yes. That is the decision. I don't know what they were putting in the cocaine what they were cutting it with at that time in 1985, but it gives you nothing but Alan Parsons Project vibes. So 1986 can't do it. It only happened in 1985. We just have to, accept the 1985 wisdom of it and move on. It was a different time.
Man, you nailed it. You're right. It was like 12 months that you could kind of do that shit.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten into the costume design, which is totally like like Lisa Frankish almost, like not Lisa Frank, but like it's so colorful and mod, like and not and anachronistic that. And it was weird at first. I was like, I can't stand the costumes in this movie, but goddamn, I'm digging the synth. And then like halfway through, I'm just like, wait, the costumes are speaking to me, and I'm not even hearing the synth. Like maybe that was when the edible kicked in, but like
there's a point in like about halfway through the movie where they kind of drop the Parsons. Like I think you noticed it because it took. I ended up watching it twice. Or 1 2/3 time. I watched about 2/3 of it. I didn't realize I'd gotten that far into it, and I was texting a friend of mine, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I totally want to see that." And I was like, "Okay, I don't think my wife has seen it either. I'm going to stop and watch it again tomorrow." So I watched it twice in 2 days.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, at some point we are all like, "Hey, what happened to the synthesizers?" You know, like there's a point like in an action scene, because it's in the tower. If you start watching in that scene, the Parsons gets turned way the hell down in that scene, and it doesn't really come back until the very end.
Well, yeah, the second half is all about God, right? And I guess they were just like they were cutting the thing. They were just like, we can't have the sense when they're talking about God. Like it's not gonna work.
They ran out of cocaine. They're like, oh wait,
bring in the violin,
strings. We need some flutes here.
Oh man, well, this is good. We found, I think, a lot of juicy stuff on this. We haven't talked about Captain Marquette though, who apparently is a completely forgettable villain. He's literally there to just be the sword that gets in the way of the bishop.
They should have given Molina his part.
Yeah, they should have. That guy, I don't know. He was that Alan Parsons? Like he looked it. Like you said, like a kind of goatee, beardish thing, and then a foppish like Deadhead style.
He was in Straw Dogs. He was in I don't know, he was in a few movies. I'd never seen him before. He almost had kind of a Alfred Molina look to him. When I was watching it the second time, I was like, oh, I think that's Alfred Molina. I know he's in this movie. And then when Alfred Molina actually comes in, like later in the movie, I'm like, oh no, yeah, that's Alfred Molina. But he has a kind of like, he's the Timu Alfred Molina, it turns out.
I mean, a completely forgettable performance. It's really too sad.
A little bit.
Basically, the main person for the badass Rutger Hauer to cross swords with is this like drip, this like guy who's there to like, I'll go kill him, to the bishop, and then like completely failing to kill him or the mouse or anybody, and yelling at his soldiers. Yeah, and sometimes he killed one of them, didn't he? I think like Rutger Hauer throws a soldier into his sword. And
he pushes
and he kind of shoves him off.
Hauer's sword.
Yeah,
it's the only guy he kills. It's one guy is like, what?
Yeah, and if I haven't been kind of insisting a little bit, the battle scenes in this are a little bit kind of unimpressive. Part of that is that I think that there's just no flair to this villainy. Captain Marquette is just there to like be thrown on the ground and spit and like jump up, and
he mostly, I mean, in the big, the climactic fight, in the chapel or whatever. He's mostly there to get beaten up by Rutger Hauer slowly for 5 minutes before almost posing a threat at the end, and then not at all.
Dude, what did the bishop have over that guy? He was really willing to go all the way.
It was the power of the church. It was, you do whatever these guys, they're men of God. You do what they tell you to do, and they didn't know that he was in league with Satan. that was one of the things. Was like, it's a low there's no other magic in this movie. And it's, somebody says like, he made the bishop made a deal with the devil himself to put this curse on them. Well, it's like, okay, so the devil is real. So is God going to step up or what? Like, why is God allowing this? Problem I
Well,
always have
God
when,
is just
when
God
the
is
devil
drinking
gets
buddies.
involved in the story. It's like,
God is
isn't
drinking
there
buddies
another
with
half of the
Leo
equation?
McKern.
What?
The God is drinking buddies, Leo McKern. He's stepping up just by whispering into like the
That's
old monk's
true.
ear and telling him how to fix it. And but like, so Leo McKern and Matthew Broderick, when they're hugging and kissing each other after after the lovers are reunited, like,
Well, they're French.
they are.
It's
Like
the old world. What do you want?
the only like just the raw emotion that they were like throwing at the camera was just so. It was kind of amazing. I was like, hey, this is the fucking glue that holds together the movie, probably for so many, romantic audience members. But still, at the same time, it was a little bit like, okay, we all know that Catholic monks are gay. Like, just just let them love each other. I don't know.
Hey, back then it was a perfectly acceptable profession for your second and third sons. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It wasn't just for the gay guys. It was for the guys who couldn't inherit anything. Back when that was an important deal.
Yep.
So, what is your verdict on this? Is it elevated trash? Is it not trash at all? Is it just a good movie or a bad movie?
No, I think it's elevated above trash. I think this, maybe it's because it never kind of got popular, that validates its art house fantasy vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the cover of the VHS is all like posterized European, like, Michelle Pfeiffer, Michelle Pfeiffer in profile with like these bold colors, and it's just it's art house fantasy, like that's there's zero blood and guts advertised here.
No. Yeah, it's I mean, like, if I had kids, I would show them this movie. I mean, I would show them. I would show them Princess Bride first. Like, no, crazy. But although this is an easier one to swallow. I mean, the jokes are a little more, on a kid's level. There's no, I mean, it's very, like I said, it's very chaste. It's, there isn't a lot of double entendre. It's very, there's no jokes about, Buttercup's breasts. It's very, it's, I don't know if you showed it to your kids or not, or if they'd seen it before, but yeah, I would, if I had seen this when I was 8 years old, when it came out, I would have loved it. I would have wanted to, run right out and see it again. It was right up my alley.
Yeah. It's a beautiful movie. It held up. Fantasy.
I feel like.
So I think I opened this podcast characterizing it as a really good fantasy that doesn't like hit the threshold of badassitude.
Yeah.
But it's clearly, I think we maybe determined that badassitude wasn't its aim. It's not a movie where you're all like, fuck yeah, kill that guy. It's the movie where it's just like, gosh, these people love each other. Like,
yeah. I mean, I felt very apart with, like, not necessarily an Arthurian legend, but some of those side characters that kind of smaller parts of the matter of Britain. But with some side character knight who it felt like those kind of stories where it's not super it's not super fantastical. There isn't a lot of high magic happening, but there's wonderment to it. There's unnatural things that happen, like people becoming wolves at night because of a curse. There's that kind of thing. It feels of a part with those. in a way that a lot of, fantasy stories, fantasy movies from the 80s don't really. I mean, I think there was like some kind of, I think you were getting at it, like it was something about like maybe it was based on an older story or not. I think there was some kind of confusion over that.
They pitched it that way. I think the writers they totally made up the story, but the writers were just like, if we give this a little touch of historicism, that's going to be the secret sauce that sells the film. And then that ended up being a thing that just rolled all the way into the marketing.
I think they should have had the balls to say based on a true story.
Oh yeah. Coen Brothers it up. And I pretty sure I totally believed it back then when I watched this, and I think I looked at the VHS cover and I was totally like, oh, this is like a this is I don't know, Banshees of the Innocence or something.
It feels like from the appendices of Hawk Tuah or something like that.
Totally.
Sir Bors goes off and romances a chick who turns into a hawk. Yeah, something like that. There's some minor characters. Yeah. Great movie, art house fantasy. Wish it was more badass. Totally understand why it's not, and I think I think the movie very much answered it for me. That it's just like, nope, that's not what we're about. No, yeah, and I think it's for not being able to compare it to seeing it earlier, I can say that it holds up. It doesn't feel like a nearly 40-year-old movie. It feels like something you could make right now, and looks pretty decent for it. I mean, again, like they didn't try to do any kind of crazy special effects. So I'm still saying that sword though in the tree next to Matthew Broderick. How the hell did we do that? I gotta look it up. Yeah, it is pretty impressive. But I think it absolutely holds up. I would, like I said, if I had kids, I would show them this movie. And if they were even a little into nerdy stuff, definitely would. Yeah, maybe I will show it to them. I'll be like, hey, you don't watch much football in this household, or you're gonna see some football helmets. Yeah, I wish we could put up a picture of the helmets. Those are those. I think Ellen Parsons designed the helmets too. I didn't see it in the credits, but I'm gonna go back and check just to make sure. Okay, that sounds like a pretty solid verdict on Ladyhawke. Yeah, go watch it. Yeah, thumbs up. Thumbs up, but don't look for the bad attitude. No, it's not that kind of movie. Look for. It's a Saturday afternoon. Nothing's on. Maybe it's raining. Hey, you put on Ladyhawke, you have a good time. It's like listening to an Alan Parsons album, probably. Maybe, I don't know. We'll find out. So Hawktober Fest is rolling on. So we'll be watching something spooky for the next episode. We haven't quite ironed it out, but it'll be pants shitting. You probably. Yes. You will die. We are not horror guys. I'm not a horror guy. Yeah, that's true. I've been watching a fair amount of horror lately. This time of year rolls around, and I'm a basic bitch for that kind of. That's the one thing. I don't decorate the house or anything, but it's like, yes, spooky movies. That's the kind of nerd I am for it. All right. Well, we can really explore that next week, because that's a very different approach to horror than I have. Okay. Sounds juicy. Cool. All right. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. We will catch you in a couple weeks. Bye, Internet. Bye. All right. And we are stopping. All right, cool.